He thought humiliating her would be easy, but he had no idea he was seconds away from losing everything. The moment Vanessa Cole stepped onto the polished marble floor, the room had already judged her. Her sneakers were worn, her jacket plain. Nothing about her matched the sleek glass walls or the six-figure suits moving through the lobby. Conversations didn't stop, but they shifted, lowered just enough to let quiet smirks pass between strangers. At the front desk, the manager, a tall white man with a perfectly pressed navy suit, noticed her immediately, not with curiosity, but with dismissal. He didn't ask how he could help. He didn't greet her. He simply looked her up and down, then turned slightly, as if she were already an inconvenience. Vanessa didn't rush. Her steps were calm, measured, echoing softly against the floor as she approached. "I'd like to speak with someone about," she began, her voice steady. But he cut her off before she could finish. "Ma'am," he said, forcing a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Appointments are required for serious inquiries." A few people nearby glanced over, sensing the tension. Vanessa paused, her eyes steady, unreadable. "I won't take long," she replied quietly. The manager let out a small, dry laugh, just loud enough to carry. That's usually what people say when they don't understand where they are. A ripple of amusement passed through the space. Someone whispered. Someone else chuckled. Vanessa stood there, not shrinking, not reacting, just watching. The manager leaned in slightly, lowering his voice but making sure it was still heard. "This isn't your kind of place." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. And for a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what she would do. But Vanessa didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. Instead, she slowly turned her gaze across the room, taking in every face, every expression, every silent judgment. Then, with complete calm, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. No anger, no hesitation, just one quiet action that would change everything. The phone barely made a sound when she unlocked it, but somehow, every eye in the room felt drawn to that single motion. Vanessa Cole held it steady, her expression unchanged, as if nothing about this moment was unusual. The manager exhaled sharply through his nose, already losing patience. "If you were trying to call someone, I suggest you do it outside," he said, his voice tightening. "We have actual clients to attend to." A few people nodded subtly, reinforcing the invisible line he had drawn around her. Vanessa did not respond to him. Instead, she raised the phone to her ear, her posture relaxed, almost indifferent. "Tell them I am here," she said quietly, then ended the call before anyone could make sense of it. The manager scoffed, turning slightly toward his staff. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Every week, it is the same thing. People walk in thinking this is some kind of public space." A soft ripple of agreement passed through the area, but it was thinner now, less confident. Something had shifted, though no one could explain why. Vanessa slipped her phone back into her pocket and stood there, completely still, as if she had all the time in the world. The manager checked his watch, then looked back at her with open irritation. "Ma'am, I am going to have to ask you to leave if you do not have legitimate business here." His words were firmer now, sharper, designed to end the situation. Still, she did not move. She simply met his gaze, calm and steady, the kind of stillness that made people uncomfortable without knowing why. Seconds passed, then more. The room, once filled with quiet laughter and murmurs, began to settle into something heavier. Conversation slowed. A receptionist glanced toward the glass entrance, then quickly looked away. The manager followed her line of sight, frowning slightly. At first, there was nothing, just the reflection of the street outside, sunlight bouncing off passing cars. But then the doors opened. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to let in a group of sharply dressed figures moving with purpose. Their pace was direct, their expressions focused, and without hesitation, they walked straight past the front desk. The manager straightened instinctively, his professional smile snapping back into place as confusion flickered across his face. "Good afternoon," he began, stepping forward, but the group did not stop for him. They did not even look at him. Instead, they continued walking until they reached Vanessa. And then, in a shift so subtle yet undeniable, they stopped, forming a quiet line beside her. The air changed. The balance of the room tilted. And for the first time since she walked in, the manager's confidence faltered. The manager's smile faltered for only a second, but it was enough for everyone to notice. His eyes moved quickly between the suited figures now standing beside Vanessa, trying to place them, trying to understand why none of them were acknowledging him. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, forcing his voice back into its polished tone, but there was a thin crack beneath it. No one answered him. Instead, one of the men, an older executive with silver hair and a calm, commanding presence, stepped slightly forward and looked directly at Vanessa. "Ma'am," he said respectfully, his voice low but clear, "we were informed you had arrived." The words landed like a quiet shockwave. The manager blinked, his posture stiffening. "Arrived?" he repeated under his breath, as if the word itself did not belong in this moment. Vanessa did not rush to respond. She let the silence settle, let the weight of that single word spread across the room. Then she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," she said, her tone calm, controlled, completely different from how she had been treated just moments ago. The shift was undeniable. The same space that had dismissed her now leaned toward her, every movement suddenly centered around her presence. A receptionist froze mid-step. A guest lowered his phone. Even the soft background music seemed to fade into nothing. The manager cleared his throat, stepping forward again, trying to regain control of a situation that was slipping through his fingers. "I am sorry, but there must be some confusion," he said, forcing a light chuckle. "This area is restricted to clients and scheduled meetings." His words sounded rehearsed now, weaker, as if even he no longer believed them. Vanessa turned her gaze to him slowly, her expression steady, unreadable, but there was something else now, something grounded, unshakable. "You are right," she said quietly. "There is a misunderstanding." For a brief second, relief flickered across his face. But it did not last, because she took one small step forward, and the men beside her moved with her without hesitation. The motion was subtle, but it shifted the entire balance of the room. "You thought I did not belong here," she continued, her voice calm but carrying effortlessly through the silence. The manager opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He froze, caught between denial and the growing realization forming in his mind. Vanessa held his gaze, unblinking, composed, as if she had seen this moment long before he ever could. And then, without raising her voice, she said the words that would change everything. "I am not here to ask for permission," Vanessa said, her voice calm, measured, and impossibly steady. "I am here because this place already belongs to me." The words did not echo loudly, but they landed with a weight that silenced everything. For a moment, no one moved. The manager blinked, his mind struggling to catch up, his polished confidence cracking in plain sight. "That is not possible," he said quickly, almost instinctively, his tone sharp but unsteady. "Ownership changes go through corporate. I would have been informed." A faint murmur spread through the room, uncertain now, no longer amused. Vanessa did not react to his denial. Instead, she reached into her jacket and pulled out a slim folder, placing it gently on the marble counter between them. The sound was soft, but in the silence, it felt amplified. One of the executives beside her stepped forward, opening the folder with precise, practiced motion. "The acquisition was finalized at 9:42 this morning," he said clearly, his voice carrying authority that could not be questioned. "All controlling shares have been transferred. Effective immediately." The manager's eyes flicked down to the documents, scanning quickly, then again, slower this time. His face began to lose color. "There has to be a mistake," he muttered, but the certainty in his voice was gone. Vanessa watched him without expression, her gaze steady, almost distant, as if she had already moved beyond this moment. Around them, the atmosphere shifted completely. The same people who had laughed now stood frozen, their earlier confidence replaced with quiet discomfort. A receptionist lowered her eyes. A guest turned away, pretending not to stare. The manager swallowed hard, his posture no longer commanding, his shoulders tightening as realization settled in. You are the new owner?" he asked, the words barely forming as his voice dropped. Vanessa did not answer immediately. She let the silence stretch, let the weight of the truth settle fully before she spoke. Then, with a calm that cut deeper than any raised voice, she said, "I have always been the one making decisions. Today is just the first time you noticed." The room went completely still. No laughter, no whispers, just the quiet sound of someone realizing they had misjudged everything. And in that stillness, the balance of power shifted entirely, leaving the manager standing there, no longer in control, no longer certain, as the consequences of a single moment of disrespect began to unfold. The manager's lips parted, but no sound came out. The authority he once carried had dissolved into something fragile, something uncertain, as if the ground beneath him had quietly shifted and he had only just realized he was no longer standing on solid ground. His eyes darted around the room, searching for support, for validation, for anyone who might confirm that this moment was not real. But no one stepped in. No one spoke. The same staff who had laughed moments ago now avoided his gaze, their posture stiff, their silence louder than any reaction. Vanessa remained still, her presence calm, controlled, untouched by the chaos unfolding around her. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "I gave you an opportunity," she said quietly, her tone even, almost reflective, as if she were stating a simple fact rather than delivering a judgment. The manager swallowed hard, trying to recover, his hands tightening at his sides. "Ma'am, if there has been any misunderstanding, I assure you we can resolve this professionally," he said quickly, forcing a smile that now looked strained, almost desperate. Vanessa's eyes did not soften. "You already showed me what professionalism looks like here," she replied, her voice steady, each word precise. The air seemed to tighten again, heavier this time, as the meaning settled in. One of the executives stepped slightly forward, holding a tablet, waiting silently for her instruction. Vanessa glanced at it briefly, then back at the manager. "You represent this company," she said, her gaze unwavering. "Every word you speak becomes its standard." The manager nodded too quickly, eager now, trying to align himself with whatever direction this moment was taking. "Of course, absolutely, and I take that responsibility very seriously," he said, his voice rushing over itself. But Vanessa did not respond to his words. She let a brief silence stretch, long enough for the weight of his earlier actions to return, uninvited, undeniable. Then she spoke again, softer this time, but far more final. "Not anymore." The words landed without force, yet they carried a finality that could not be mistaken. The manager froze, his expression collapsing into disbelief as the meaning reached him. The executive beside Vanessa tapped the tablet once, efficient, precise. Somewhere behind them, a quiet intake of breath broke the stillness. Vanessa did not look away. She simply held his gaze, calm and unwavering, as the reality of his actions closed in around him. And in that moment, the room did not just witness a change in ownership. It witnessed the quiet, undeniable cost of underestimating someone who never needed to prove anything at all. The sound of the tablet locking echoed faintly, a small, final click that seemed louder than it should have been. The manager stood there, unmoving, as if his body had not yet caught up with what had just happened. His mouth opened slightly, searching for words that refused to come, while the room around him remained suspended in a quiet, heavy stillness. Vanessa did not rush the moment. She allowed it to settle, to be fully understood, not just by him, but by everyone watching. Because this was no longer just about one person. It was about what had been revealed. One of the executives stepped closer, his tone calm but firm. "Security will assist you with your transition," he said, not unkindly, but with a clarity that left no room for negotiation. The manager blinked, finally reacting, his composure cracking as he took a half step back. "Wait," he said quickly, his voice lower now, stripped of its earlier confidence. "There has to be some kind of discussion. I have been with this company for years." His words hung in the air, but they carried no weight anymore. Vanessa watched him, her expression unchanged, her eyes steady, not cold, but certain. "And in those years," she said quietly, "you decided who was worth your respect." The statement was not loud, but it cut deeper than anything else that had been said. The manager's shoulders dropped slightly, the truth of it settling in, undeniable. Around them, the staff shifted subtly, their posture different now, more careful, more aware. No one laughed anymore. No one whispered. The atmosphere had changed completely, replaced by a quiet understanding that something important had just happened. Vanessa took a slow step forward, her presence commanding without effort. This company will not operate that way moving forward, she continued, her voice calm, each word deliberate. Every person who walks through these doors will be treated with the same level of respect, regardless of how they look or what you assume about them. A faint nod came from one of the employees near the back, almost involuntary, as if the words had reached deeper than expected. Vanessa turned slightly, her gaze sweeping across the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away, then slowly returned. That standard begins now, she said. The room remained silent, but it was no longer the same silence as before. It was not filled with judgment or amusement. It was filled with awareness. And standing at the center of it all, Vanessa Cole did not need to raise her voice, did not need to prove anything further. Because in that moment, everyone understood exactly who she was, and more. Importantly, what she stood for. No one spoke, but something deeper than silence settled across the room, the kind that forces people to look inward whether they want to or not. Vanessa did not move immediately. She let the weight of her words linger, giving everyone time to understand that this was not just a moment of correction, but a shift in direction. The executives beside her remained still, attentive, waiting, their presence reinforcing what had already become undeniable. Near the front desk, one of the younger employees straightened her posture, her eyes flickering between Vanessa and the space where the manager had stood, as if seeing the entire place differently for the first time. Vanessa noticed it, not with a smile, not with approval, but with quiet acknowledgement. Because change did not begin with policies. It began with awareness. She took a slow step forward, her voice calm, but carrying clearly through the room. This is not about punishment, she said, her tone even, measured. It is about standards. The words settled gently, but firmly, removing any illusion that this was personal. It was bigger than that. One of the executives nodded slightly, as if confirming what had already been decided long before this moment. Vanessa turned her gaze toward the front desk, where the receptionist now stood completely still, hands folded, waiting. "What is your name?" Vanessa asked. "Emily." The young woman replied quickly, her voice steady but cautious. Vanessa held her gaze for a brief moment, not testing, not intimidating, simply observing. "Emily," she repeated, her tone neutral. "If someone walked in today dressed exactly like I did, how would you treat them?" The question was simple, but the room seemed to tighten again, waiting for the answer. Emily hesitated for only a second, then answered honestly. "The same as anyone else," she said. Vanessa gave a small nod, almost imperceptible, but enough. "Good," she replied. "Because that is the only correct answer." A quiet shift passed through the staff, subtle but real, as if something unspoken had just been reset. Vanessa stepped back slightly, her presence no longer demanding attention, yet still anchoring the entire space. She did not need to say more. The message had already landed. And as the room slowly began to breathe again, one thing was clear to everyone watching. This was not just a change in leadership. It was the beginning of something they had never experienced before, something that could not be ignored, and something that would redefine every interaction from that moment forward. The room did not return to normal right away, because what had just happened was not something people could simply move past. It lingered in the air, in the way employees stood a little straighter, in the way conversations resumed more carefully, as if every word now carried weight. Vanessa Cole remained near the front, her presence no longer questioned, no longer misunderstood, but now quietly respected. One of the executives leaned in slightly, speaking in a low, professional tone. "We can begin the internal transition whenever you are ready," he said. Vanessa gave a small nod, her eyes still scanning the space, not searching for flaws, but understanding it, piece by piece. "Not yet," she replied calmly. "First, I want to see how things operate when no one thinks they are being watched." The executive paused, then nodded in agreement, stepping back without another word. Nearby, Emily adjusted a stack of documents at the front desk, her movements more deliberate now, her attention sharper. A customer approached hesitantly, glancing between her and Vanessa, unsure of what to expect after witnessing everything unfold. Emily greeted him with a steady voice, offering assistance without hesitation, without judgment. Vanessa noticed. She always noticed. Across the room, a few employees exchanged quiet looks, not of amusement, but of reflection. They had seen what disrespect looked like when it went unchecked. And now they had seen what it looked like when it was answered, not with anger, but with clarity. Vanessa took a slow step back, giving the space room to breathe again. Yet her presence remained undeniable, like a quiet anchor holding everything in place. She turned slightly toward the executive team, her voice low but decisive. "We are not just changing leadership," she said. "We are changing culture." The words were simple, but they carried a direction that could not be ignored. One of the executives gave a firm nod, understanding exactly what that meant. Policies could be rewritten, procedures could be updated, but culture required something deeper. It required consistency. It required accountability. It required people to choose differently, even when no one was watching. Vanessa looked once more across the room, meeting the eyes of those who dared to look back. No fear, no anger, just a quiet expectation. And in that moment, everyone understood that this was only the beginning, because what happened next would not be announced. It would be revealed, slowly, through every decision made from this point forward. By the time the afternoon light shifted across the marble floor, the space no longer felt the same. It was subtle at first, almost invisible, but it was there in the way voices softened, in the way employees paused before speaking, choosing their words more carefully than before. Vanessa Cole stood quietly near the center of it all, not commanding attention, yet somehow holding it without effort. She did not need to remind anyone of what had happened. They were already carrying it with them. One by one, the staff adjusted, not because they were told to, but because they understood. The laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by something quieter, something more aware. Emily assisted another guest with steady confidence, her tone respectful, her posture aligned with the standard that had just been set. Across the room, a senior employee approached a visitor who did not look like their usual clientele, and for a brief moment, there was hesitation. Then, remembering, he straightened and greeted them properly. Vanessa noticed that too. She noticed everything. Not to judge, not to intimidate, but to understand who they chose to be when given a second chance. One of the executives stepped beside her again, his voice low. "It is already changing," he said. Vanessa did not respond immediately. Her gaze remained on the people moving through the space, watching how small decisions began to reflect something larger. "Change is easy to say," she replied quietly. "Consistency is what proves it." The executive nodded, understanding the difference. Vanessa turned slightly, her eyes moving toward the entrance, where the same doors that had once framed her as an outsider now opened and closed without question, without judgment. She took a slow breath, not of relief, but of certainty, because this was never about proving who she was. It was about revealing who they were willing to become. The room moved forward, not perfectly, not all at once, but differently. And in that difference, something new began to take shape, something that could not be forced, only chosen. Vanessa stepped away from the center, her presence no longer needed to define the moment, because the moment had already defined itself. And as the quiet rhythm of the place settled into this new reality, one truth remained, clear and unshakable. Respect is not given to power. It is revealed through